As a Christian who follows Jesus, it's essential to examine the role of vaccines in our lives and whether they align with our faith. While vaccines have been widely accepted as a means of preventing infectious diseases, some Christians argue that they are unnecessary, citing their trust in God's sovereignty and the power of prayer. This essay will explore the reasoning behind this perspective, delving into the biblical basis for this stance, the concept of faith and healing, and the potential risks associated with vaccines. From a biblical standpoint, Christians who oppose vaccines often point to scriptures that emphasize God's power to heal and protect. In Psalm 103:3, it is written, "He forgives all your sins and heals all your diseases." This verse, among others, is seen as a promise that God will take care of our physical well-being, making vaccines unnecessary. Additionally, some Christians believe that trusting in vaccines rather than God's provision is a form of idolatry, where we prioritize human solutions over divine intervention. This perspective is rooted in the idea that our faith should be in God alone, and that relying on vaccines demonstrates a lack of trust in His power. Another argument against vaccines is the concept of faith and healing. Many Christians believe that prayer and faith can lead to miraculous healing, citing biblical accounts of Jesus' ministry where He healed the sick and afflicted. In Mark 16:18, Jesus says, "They will pick up snakes with their hands, and when they drink deadly poison, it will not hurt them at all. They will place their hands on sick people, and they will get well." This verse is often seen as a promise that believers will be protected from harm, including diseases that vaccines aim to prevent. By trusting in God's power to heal, Christians who oppose vaccines believe that they are demonstrating their faith and trust in His provision. Some Christians also point to the potential risks associated with vaccines, such as side effects and the possibility of vaccine-related injuries. While the likelihood of these occurrences is extremely low, they argue that the risk is still present and that trusting in vaccines is not a foolproof solution. Furthermore, the use of fetal cells in the development of some vaccines raises ethical concerns for some Christians, who believe that it is morally wrong to use products that are derived from aborted fetuses. This perspective is rooted in a biblical value of respecting human life and the sanctity of the unborn. It's also worth noting that the Amish community, who are largely Christian, have been known to have lower vaccination rates, and yet they do not seem to be disproportionately affected by infectious diseases. This observation is often cited as evidence that vaccines are not as necessary as the medical community claims. However, it's essential to acknowledge that the Amish lifestyle, which often involves a more isolated and self-sufficient community, may contribute to their relatively low incidence of infectious diseases. In conclusion, while the majority of the medical community advocates for the use of vaccines to prevent infectious diseases, some Christians who follow Jesus believe that they are unnecessary. This perspective is rooted in a biblical basis that emphasizes God's power to heal and protect, the concept of faith and healing, and concerns about the potential risks associated with vaccines. By trusting in God's sovereignty and the power of prayer, these Christians demonstrate their faith and trust in His provision, even in the face of potential health risks. Ultimately, whether or not to vaccinate is a personal decision that should be made after careful consideration of the available information and one's own values and beliefs.